Good morning, Parshat Shelach, Tavshin Pei Aleph. You really can't, from my perspective, even begin to understand Parshat Shelach without a short piece of the Chidushei Arim, the first Ger Rebbe. It was written, it was nifted in 1856. But before we go into the Chidushim, which we've spoken about many times, in fact, I got a Nachas Ruach this week. Rabbi Meyer sent out a video about Parshat Shelach and about how certain Gedolim act and conduct themselves. He didn't mention any names, but he sent out a video. And then Levi Blumenfeld, he was one of the high-tech fellas that were involved in the year-long of Zooming, making sure all the videos got uploaded. So Levi remembered that I had sent out for Parshat Shelach last year the Chidushei Arim that talks about Gedolim before Mashiach comes. And he found it. And he sent it to Rabbi Myers and copied me on it. So I know someone kept one hand out and listened to one share. So that's Baruch Hashem, that's already a good ticket. This morning, I went to the orthopedic store in the Merkaz, where they make orthotics for your shoes. And I have orthotics in my shoes. And as I'm talking to Yehuda, the owner of the store, another young man walks in, he sits down. Yehuda's, we're working on my shoe, and Yehuda's talking to me, and we're talking about, like, this is like really unbelievable. The week of the Parshas Meraglim, we found 61 new Meraglim. And Meraglim has to do with orthotics. Meraglim, regel, feet, right? So regel, Meraglim, we always think about, they're spies. But why are they called Meraglim? From the word regel, feet. Because what spies do around, what do spies do? They walk around. What do they call them in the army? The guys that go, the guys that go in secretly to check out what's going on near the border. I forgot what they call them in English. The whatever. That's what Meraglim are. They walk around with their feet. That's why they're called Meraglim. So I said to him, you know, the Zohar HaKadosh says in this week's Parsha that the reason the Meraglim did what they did is because they saw that they're going to not be the Nesiim when they go to Eretz Yisrael, which was the case. Because in Parshas, I believe Parshas Maseh, the Rabbanu Shalom tells Moshe Rabbeinu, here are the names of the new Nesiim that will take the new generation into Eretz Yisrael. So the Rabbanu Shalom wanted new Nesiim to take them into Eretz Yisrael, irrespective of the Chet HaMeraglim. The Meraglim knew that they're going to be 12 new people that are going to take them into Eretz Yisrael, and they didn't want to lose their positions. And because they didn't want to lose their positions, Parshas Maseh, they didn't want to lose their positions, so they figured they can delay this thing so they can remain in their positions. And that was the Chet HaMeraglim, which is what's been happening for the last couple of weeks, certainly this week. Everybody wants to be the head of something, and so they're willing to sell everything out so they can be the head of something. Even if it means for a week. I'll rotate for a week. That's all right. It doesn't make a difference as long as I get to be something for a week, and you take over after another week. You can't. It's a headache already to even pay attention to the news because you don't know who's going to be what on a given month. Everything's on a rotatsia. It's not just a prime ministership that's on a rotatsia. There are cabinet ministers that'll be rotating. The judicial selection committee is going to be rotating. Okay, it's mamish shtuyot. It's crazy. Baruch Hashem, we're moving in the good direction either way. This morning they lost their 61st vote to convene the Knesset. Nir Orbach of Yamina withdrew his signature. So they don't even have the 61 needed to convene the Knesset to vote on anything. So Bein Kach the Rebbeinu Shalom is running the world. So I said to this person, this young man, I said this to Yehuda in the orthopedic store, that the Zohar HaKadosh says this is why they didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael, because they wanted to be the heads, and they didn't want to switch somebody else being the head. So, and then we started saying, that's what's going on in Eretz Yisrael. Everybody's got their egos, crazy egos. So this young man was sitting there, and he said, I'm interested to know more about the Zohar, but I really don't care about politics. I don't even listen to news. I don't really care what's going on here. I said, what are you doing in this store? He said, what do you mean? My feet hurt. I'm here for orthotics. I said, why do you care about your feet hurting? He's talking English. I said, I'm not following you at all. I don't understand what you mean. My feet hurt. That's why I'm in the store. So I said to him, and you think I understand what you're talking about? You don't think I understand what you're talking about. I don't understand what you're talking about. You don't understand what I'm talking about. You don't understand my question. Why are you in the store? I'm in the store because my feet hurt. Yeah, and I'm talking to him about the Zohar and about what's going into Eretz Yisrael because my feet hurt also. Except it's not your personal feet, it's the feet of a whole nation that's in danger. So why are you so selfish to only think about the pain in your feet, not the pain of an entire nation? This is everybody's focused on their own little pain and not the pain of a Klal Yisrael. And this was the Chet HaMeraglim. You have 10 out of 12 who the Zohar HaKadosh say, we're going to lose our jobs if we go into Eretz Yisrael. They're going to be new Nesiim. No, let's stay here a little longer so we can keep our jobs. Yeah, what about the rest of the Klal Yisrael? The rest of the Klal Yisrael needs to go into Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, but we need to be Nesiim. What about a whole nation here in Eretz Yisrael? Yeah, but I want to be the Prime Minister. Well, who cares what you want to be? There's a whole nation involved. No, I want to be Prime Minister. So the Chet HaMeraglim repeats itself in the Parsha, in this Parsha. And I always say the Lubavitch Rebbe Zechron Tzaddik Levracha used to say that he doesn't necessarily read the New York Times, because when he does Shnai Mikra Ve'echad Targum, each week he knows all the news that's going to be going on in the world that week. And we can expect, hopefully, a nice machlekes next week. Next week is Kairach. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says, Eizehi machlekes shi l'shem shamayim. What's a machlekes that's in the name of heaven? That's a good machlekes. Machlekes Hillel v'Shammai. Good. Because they're fighting over the halacha. Eizehi machlekes she'ein l'shem shamayim. What's a machlekes that's not l'shem shamayim? Zu machlekes kairach v'chol hadasei. There's a problem here, the Mefarshim asks. What's l'shem shamayim? Hillel Shammai. Two sides of the machlekes. She'ein l'shem shamayim is machlekes Moshe v'Kairach. What's Kairach v'chol hadasei? Kairach and his group weren't fighting amongst each other. It was Kairach versus Moshe. Like Hillel versus Shammai, it was Kairach versus Moshe. What's Kairach l'hadasei? So the Mefarshim say, the truth of the matter is, the Ikna machlekes, and the reason why the whole thing fell apart is not because of the fight with Moshe, because amongst themselves they couldn't figure out who really should take over if they dethrone Moshe. The machlokas was in Kairach and Kol Hadasei. And if you read next week's Parsha, you'll see then you have 250 people bringing Ketores, or 250 people bringing Ketores. Because whoever survives, maybe I'll be the Prime Minister. Once we dethrone Moshe, we have 250 more Amadim here. We need to know who will be. So there was a machlokes amongst them. And then if you learn the Ramban said there's another machlokes there. Kairach said, if we dethrone Moshe, I take over because I'm a Levi. And then there was a whole Maisa with Bechayros. Right? The Bechayros had been deposed. At the Maisa Egel, Hashem said, originally the firstborns were to serve me in the Mishkan Beis HaMikdash. Because you did the Egel, I'm turning it over and now I'm giving the job to the Levium. That's Parshas in the Torah. So Bechayros said, if we get rid of Moshe, We become the Balabatim here. We were originally the Balabatim. We lost it at the Egel. Get rid of Moshe. We're the Balabatim again. The Levium say, no, what are you talking about? We're the Balabatim. So the Balabatim are fine with the Balabatim. And guess what Moshe Rabbeinu was doing? Good. Keep on going. Keep on. Good. And you self-implode yourselves. Let me ask Shem next week. There'll be a final machlekes between the Karach and Adasai, and they'll self-implode. Bezrat Hashem. So you can't, from my perspective, understand the Parsha with first understanding that we're dealing with 12 people. We know 2 of them survived, Yoshua and Kalev. Now what do we think? Do we think Yoshua and Kalev were the tzaddikim and the other 10 were bums? These are Yoshua, Kalev type people. Who picked these people? So it says Moshe. Other Mefarshim, including the Netziv, say Vayishlach Oisa Moshe mimid Perek Yud Gimel Pasuk Gimel Vayishlach Oisa Moshe midbar Paran Al Pi Hashem Kulam Anoshim Rosh Yivnei Yisrael Hema. Al Pi Hashem means that the Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe who to send. These are 12 Yoshua Kalev types. Yoshua Kalev managed to meet the challenge. The other 10 couldn't. We're not talking about a bunch of bums. Ad Kedei Kach, that we talk about the Kotzker and his 5-second sharp Divrei Torah. He says in the Parsha, Perek Yudalid Pasuk Vav. Perek Yudal Pasuk Yud, the famous pasuk that we talk about. Vayerm Ishal Achav Nitna Rosh Neshuv Mitzrayim. My father Zechrein Olav used to talk about this. People started saying, let's appoint a new head and let's go back to Mitzrayim. And my father survived the war. He said, we had nothing. We weighed 70, 80 pounds when we were liberated. We were nothing. We were emaciated. We had no money. We had nothing. And we were told, get on a boat. We're going to send you to America. With what? What are we supposed to do in America? We don't have 2 nickels. Right? Would anybody say, when you got off the boat at Ellis Island, you know what's a little tough here, send me back to Auschwitz? These are people that were in Mitzrayim. This is the generation that lived through the rape, the torture, their children being killed in Mitzrayim. And whenever things don't go their way, how about we go back to Auschwitz? And we're not talking about Parshat the people. Moshe Rabbeinu hears that, he says, Vayipol Moshe Aaron al pneim l'fnei kol haladas me'Yisrael. Moshe and Aaron fall on their faces in front of Kahol Kahaladas me'Yisrael. V'Yeshua ben Nun, Pasuk Vav. V'Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna. Look carefully at the Pasuk. Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna min Atarim es Haaretz. Under the word Aretz, Rabbi Dickman Sabal Kairei. Under the word Aretz there is an Esnachta. That's a comma. So the pasuk reads, and Yoshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna, who were 2 of the spies, Karu B'Geim. They ripped their clothing when they heard such a thing. Let's go back to Auschwitz. They ripped their clothing. So the Kotzker asks, why doesn't the pasuk say Yoshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna Karu B'Geim? How many psukim before did we read that Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna were 2 of the 12? It's a couple psukim before. It says Yeshua and Kalev are 2 of the 12. The pasuk should say Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna tore their clothing. It says Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna from the spies they tore their. I know that's from the spies. The Kotzker puts the Esnach in another place. He says Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna Esnachta. Kama. Yoshua ben Nun and Kalev ben Yefuna. Min haTorah mes haaretz Karu B'Geim. Of course, he spoke in Yiddish in the 1850s. Spoke in Yiddish. He's talking in Poland. The Meraglim were größer tzaddikim. In weiße Socken and schwarze Yibitzes. They walked around with the white high socks and the bekishes. It's a real from Yidden. So Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna. Yeshua ben Nun and Kalev min Torah Mesaretz, from the other spies, Korah B'Gdeim. They ripped off their white socks with their bekishes. You're going to talk Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael. You don't wear white socks. You don't wear bekishes. Yeshua ben Nun v'Kalev ben Yefuna min Torah Mesaretz, Korah B'Gdeim. Go put on a pair of jeans, do whatever you want, but don't fool the whole world with the white socks and the bekishes. Again, the point here is that we're talking about Gedolei Yisrael. If you look at the Medrashim talk about Mamish Gedolei Yisrael. So Chedush Rim says as follows. There's so much attention given in this week's Parshat to the Meraglim. And Baruch Hashem, this year, last year also courtesy of Corona, I think even the year before that, I wasn't in America. Probably the year before that. But for whatever reason, when I used to visit my father's Zechreinu Livrocha, I used to go to America to visit him. So for whatever reason, it worked out during this time of year. And I don't know why I've talked about it in Shir several times. It ended up, I was in America, Parshat Shelach, for several years in a row. And I would go to shul in Davin, and my father lived in an area where there were like Rabbanim shuls, not shtiblach, so you listen to the rabbi's drasha. And every year that I visited my father, I had to go to a different shul, because I remembered what the Rav said the year before Parshat Shelach. And it was nimis, it was mamish nimis. Ad kedei kach, that there was one year I went over to a Rav. It was in Flatbush. My father lived. He rented an apartment. We took him from Florida. We brought him to Flatbush. We rented him an apartment near the train tracks, Avenue I and the train tracks over there. I finally went over to a Rav and I said, "Mechilas HaKavod, I want to tell you a little story. There was a wonderful Rav in the shul I grew up in, Young Israel of Redwood in Canarsie. It's a wonderful Rav. Rabbi Reisman. But not the Wagner. The name was Rabbi Reisman. And for whatever reason, in the drasha came up the Gemara that says, Arba Chashuvim Kemes. The Gemara in the Dorm says 4 people are considered dead. A blind person doesn't have children, a Mitzrayim, and an Oni. For whatever reason, he's talking about this Gemara. And Nebuch, there was a woman, a guest in the shul that he didn't know about, that was older and never had children. Okay. And you heard in the next section, my father and I sat next to the mechitza. Your mamish heard the burst out and crying. So it became a ganze tararam. My father was very active, Young Israel of Red. We became a ganze tararam. We have to talk to the rabbi. He has to be more sensitive to, they're gay. My father's was a very interesting person. He said, it's a rachmanas on the woman, but what are we supposed to do? Erase certain Gemaras and not talk about certain Gemaras? I mean, what are you supposed to do? You expect my father was very, very pro-rabbi. I said, what do you want the rabbi to do? You want the rabbi to get a guest list every Erev Shabbos to know who's going to be in the women's section so he knows what he can talk about? I mean, what are you expecting of the Rav here? Okay. So I said the story over to this Rav. I said, a little sensitivity. Once in a while, Jews who live in Israel come to shul. And when you talk about Eretz Yisrael this way, I was about to burst out crying. But I held myself back because I didn't want to embarrass you that someone burst out crying because of your drasha. Aznayim lahem v'lo yishmo. What did I say? Okay, say it. So Chedush Yarim wrote in the 1850s. So I said to the Rav, how about instead of every year talking about the Meraglim in Parshas Shelach, talk about tzitzis. At the end of the Parsha is a beautiful mitzvah. Everybody does it every day. Tzitzis. Talk about the beautiful mitzvah. So many Rashi, so many. Talk about tzitzis. Laws up with the Meraglim already. Laws up. So I think I told the story here, but that was Shabbos HaGadol. I was in America for Shabbos HaGadol years ago. So my wife couldn't make Pesach. I wasn't feeling well. So we went to America to my married daughters in Cleveland for Shabbos HaGadol. And whenever I would come back to Eretz Yisrael, after a visit to my father, I would say, I can't do this anymore. I can't listen to, Mamish can't listen to it. I feel like I'm Moshe in the midbar and I'm listening to Meraglim. I can't. My wife would say to me, you're exaggerating. Nobody would say that. I'm telling you, I heard it. No, nobody would say that. So, Vayehi Hayoim, at Shabbos HaGadol, we went to shul in Cleveland, and the Rav is giving a speech there about how Jews left Mitzrayim, which is, of course, Moshe Kapoya. The Moshe Kapoya version of how Jews left Mitzrayim is that they sat in their homes with the doors locked, and they waited for Moshe to tell them they can go, and that's what we need to do. We have to lock ourselves in the safety of yeshivas and koilalim and Torah learning, and when the knock comes on the door for Moshe Rabbeinu, that's when we leave. That's the picture of how Jews leave Mitzrayim. I'm saying to them, I'm listening to this, and I said, what do I do? Do I get up and shout him down? No, it'd be embarrassing to my children here. Do I get up and walk out? Not covered up brias. You know what? When I get home, I'm going to tell my wife what he said, and she's going to say, no way he said that. I walk out of shul. I didn't realize my wife came to daven that Shabbos in shul. And I'm walking out of shul and says, did you hear what the Rav said? I said, what do you think he said? He said, this is, nah. He wouldn't say, no Rav would say such a thing. I said, no, Baruch Hashem, you heard it. They say these kind of things. So, while we focus so much on the Meraglim, we don't focus enough on tzitzis at the end of the Parsha. And I've had in mind for years, never had the chance, in mind for years to start a shiur to learn Hilchos Tzitzis. Why? Because Hilchos Tzitzis is directly connected to being connected to Eretz Yisrael. Chibas Eretz Yisrael comes from the mitzvah of tzitzis. It's one of the things that helps you in mitzvah of tzitzis. And then, I think to myself, if I give a shiur in Hilchos Tzitzis, somebody's going to raise their hand and say, what do you think about tcheles? And I wear tcheles, and it's going to become like a harabaya shiur. Half the people won't come, and half the people won't listen. There are very few things you can talk about today where, if you want to change something, not change something because it's not la halacha, if you want to talk about doing something that we used to do, that we stopped doing, and maybe we should start doing again, no, what are you talking about? Well, some radical here. What radical here? People, Moshe Rabbeinu wore tcheles. He wore tcheles. This is not like, somebody didn't wake up and say, you know what, it's not reforming conservative Judaism. Nobody woke up one morning and say, why don't we have one tzitzis in pink to honor women? Or maybe we ought to have a couple of colors on the tzitzis to honor the LGBTQT community. We're not talking about doing something like that. We're talking about, can we bring back the original mitzvah of tzitzis like Moshe Rabbeinu gave it to us? Not only that, we say it, for Asur Lahem tzitzis, al konflikt em pesel tcheles. Is there a way to do it? Mashiach comes, he'll do it. Don't talk about such things. So I go back and forth in my mind about tzitzis, and it's a very important piece of Shulchan Aruch to learn because mamish, the halachas are beautiful. We wear tzitzis, and it's a halachas that we need to know, and it's a beautiful thing if you learn how to make tzitzis. Now, instead of going into the Sforim store and buying a pair of tzitzis, you buy the beged, you buy the strings, you tie the strings. And you have your tzitzis. It's beautiful. I taught my children how to make tzitzis. It's beautiful. There's a medrash. It's Tanit Ve'Eliyahu. The Tanit Ve'Eliyahu It says that Eliyahu met a Jewish fisherman, and he said to him, "Do you learn Torah during the day?" He said, "No, I don't learn Torah." He said, "Why?" He said, "Because God didn't give me a brain that is able to study Torah." Eliyahu said to him, "I want to ask you something. How do you fish?" So he said, "I'm a big fisherman." You know, the big fishermen don't use a fishing rod. They have like big nets they toss into the water, and they pull out a whole thing of tuna, a whole thing of salmon, big nets. So he shows him the big nets. He said, "Where'd you get the net from?" He said, "I made it." He said, "You made it from what?" He tells him, "I took this material and this material, I sewed it together, I knotted it." He said, "Who gave you the brain to figure out how to make a net?" He said, "I assume HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me a brain. I understand making it." You don't think that brain can also help you understand Torah? Only it's a net, it's a fish net brain, and it's not a Torah net brain. Why am I saying this story? Because people are saying, "I'm going to the Svarim store, I'm going to buy a bag, and I'm going to buy the strings. How am I going to learn how to make tzitzis? How am I going to tie it together? It's probably so hard. It probably is. It's probably that." When you get your new phone, your new contraption, or your new computer with Windows 3754, and you must have that 3754 because 3754 works a millisecond faster than 3753. So it's getting ganz in the shama to get to 3754. And I just went through this because Yosef knows this. I don't know anything about technology really except what I need for my work. And 2 weeks ago they announced at the office in Baltimore that they're taking down the old server, putting up a new server. You need to be trained on a new server. I don't know nothing about servers. I just know which buttons to push. For the last 10 years, I don't know nothing. Okay. But if the Rebbeinu Shalom gave you enough understanding of how to sit in front of a computer and how to figure out, oh, I have a new computer, I have to go to settings, and I have to do this, I have to do this. Oh, it's Windows, it's a new Windows. Oh, it's now Outlook, it's a new type of email. How do you forward? How do you copy and paste? Oh, you press, maybe this, maybe. If you can figure out how to do all those things, you can figure out how to tie tzitzit strings. I guarantee you. The only thing you need to do is you need to learn the halacha. If you can't get it from the halacha, there are beautiful picture books today. You can open a picture book, get the beged, get the strings, and step by step make your own tzitzis. And after you make your own tzitzis, you're going to have such a geschmack to wear those tzitzis because you made them. It's going to be a whole different mitzvah than buying it ready-made in the store. Okay. So there's tzitzis in this week's parsha. The interesting thing is, the Chidush Yirim says, that we have this interesting word at the beginning of the parsha and the end of the parsha. Shlach lecha anoshim v'yasuru es eretz Canaan. What does yasuru mean in this context? Go spy out the land. Go take a good look at what's going on in this land. Yasuru. The end of the parsha in Parsha Tzitzis, it says, you look at the tzitzis, you remember all the mitzvahs Hashem, you'll do all the mitzvahs. We have that word again. And your eyes will not make you investigate things you shouldn't investigate. So v'yasur eretz Canaan means go spy it out. What does that mean? Go investigate what's going on there. And don't investigate too carefully everything your eyes look at. So the Chet HaMeraglim begins with Yasuru, and the Parsha ends with the mitzvah of tzitzis of V'lo Yisasuru. And it says, V'lo Yisasuru achrei levavchem. Don't go and follow your heart, v'achrei nechem, and your eyes. So Chidush Yirim wrote the following. Ksiv b'Parsha Tzitzis, it says in the Parsha of Tzitzis, l'saken chet hameraglim. The Rebbeinu Shalom gave us the mitzvah of Tzitzis at the end of this Parsha as a way for us to be masaken the chet hameraglim. V'lo sasuru, Pirish Rashi, Liba ve'ena beis meraglim voyachet. Shahagam sha'asor nasiyim einei ha'eda amru kain. When the Torah says, for example, v'nela me'einei ha'eda in Parshas Vayikra, the Torah talks about when the Sanhedrin paskins a halacha improperly. And Klal Yisrael and Oivra and Aveira based upon the psak, you have to bring a korban helam dovish al tziba. So it says, v'nelam, it's hidden, me'einei ha'eda, the eyes of the people make a mistake. So who are the einei ha'eda? The Gedolim. So Chedushim says, at the beginning of the Parsha, you have these Gedolim who v'yasuru. At the end of the Parsha, don't follow these people when it comes to Lashon Hara and Eretz Yisrael. And this is what he says. Klal Yisrael should have not followed these 10 people. The Ramban has a famous kasha. Moshe Rabbeinu taught them in Parshat Mishpatim, when there's a shaila, what do? You follow the majority opinion. So Moshe Rabbeinu sent 10 people, 12 people were sent there. 2 say this, 10 say not. What are they supposed to do? Listen to the 10. And Moshe Rabbeinu said, no. And the Baruch Shem said, no, you're going to get punished for listening to the 10. You should have listened to the 2. What do you mean listen to the 2? You always tell me to listen to the majority. You're not supposed to listen to the majority in these cases. V'hula lamid l'klal Yisrael. This is to teach Klal Yisrael. Shagam sheyin nevi'ei sheker oy manhigim ki yerovim ushag gedolim. Even if you have great men, sometimes you have such great men that in the VA Sheker, they can do all kinds of miracles. There's a Parshat in the Torah where a person gets up and he's a Navi Sheker. Now, who's a Navi Sheker? In the Parshat Navi Sheker, who's a Navi Sheker? He's a guy walking around in short pants with no socks, and he's got a hippie ponytail. And he says it's going to snow now when it snows, and the Torah tells us, well, don't listen to him, he's Navi Sheker. What are we talking about here? We're talking about the same kind of people, with the white socks and the black bekisher. He's a Navi Sheker. And that's why the Torah says, I'm going to test you. There are people that are going to come and do all kinds of miracles, and it looks like they have the entire resume of a Navi, and they're going to say something to you that is against the Torah. Don't listen to him. It's just a test to see your loyalty to me. So the Chedushim says there's such a thing as a Navi Sheker. There's such a thing as leaders like Yeravam. Yeravam ben Nevat, was he a bum? Chas v'shalom. Who was Yeravam ben Nevat? Handpicked by God. The Baruch Shalom said, Tachiyah Shaloni. Rechavam, the son of Shlomo, cannot rule over all of Klal Yisrael for whatever reason. Go anoint, well not anoint, go select Yeravam ben Nevat to be the king of the northern kingdom. And this Yeravam ben Nevat is a ganz feiner Mensch. We all know the famous Gemara in Sanhedrin. The Rebbeinu Shalom comes to Yeravam and he's trying to get him to do tshuva. This is according to Parshat during his lifetime. The Rebbeinu Shalom, the Gemara says, Sanhedrin comes to Yeravam and says, do tshuva. Va'ani va'ata uben yishai netayel b'gan Eden. After 120 years, you do tshuva. After 120 years, me, you, and Ben Yishai will take a walk together in Gan Eden. I'm in, right? Again, we're talking about this week. And what does Yeravam say? The famous 2 words. Mi barosh. I understand, God, you're walking in front of all 3, or you're walking in front. But who's behind you? Is it me and then David? Or is it David and then me? Can you imagine that question? The Baruch Shalom says, let's take a walk in Gan Eden together. And he wants to know am I first or is David first? Okay? Why would you lose that opportunity because of covet? But the Mefarshim say, listen to what the Gemara says. God's original suggestion to Yeravam is, Ani Va'ata uben Yishai netayel began Eden. Me, you, and David. So who's the last person on the line? David. But Yerovam ben Nevat wasn't happy enough with hearing it. He needed a confirmation. Me Barosh, I want you to say it again. Who is it? Is it David or is it me? Then the Rebbe Shalom says, Ben Yishai Barosh. David's going to be ahead of you. He says, Kain loy be'ina. So Yerovam said, I don't want to go then. So who is this Yerovam? A bum. The Rebbe Shalom is offering him. We'll take a walk together, me, you, and David in Gan Eden. We'll talk about a ganz choshev mensch. He split the northern kingdom from the southern kingdom, became an Oved Avodah Zarah. Now, whenever the Nevi'im in Malachim want to talk about a bad king, they say, he was bad like Yerovam ben Nevat. So Chedushirim says that the Parsha of Tzitzis is to come to teach us. A Tikkun Chet HaMeraglim. Even if you see Nevi'ei Sheker, even if you see Manhigim leaders like Yerovam, Ush'ar Gedolim and other Gedolim, V'yiru shenoitim miterach Hashem yisparach lefi Parshat, and just use common sense. Is what they're saying Parshat HaKadosh Baruch Hu's words, or is it something that doesn't? It's just not consistent with what God would want. It's just not consistent. Without the grubber finger, just simple. Is this something that God would want? V'yiru shenoitim miderech Hashem yisparach lefi Parshat lo yishmu lem klal. Do not listen to them. Ve'efsher yiyeh oid nisyonos ke'elu koydem hagula. And it's possible that these exact type of nisyonos will occur right before the Geula. We'll have manhigim, gedolim, nevi'ei sheker, talking about Eretz Yisrael, convincing you not to go. Wait for the man on the white donkey. We have time. Not yet. Don't listen to them. For tzitzis masakin hainayim. The mitzvah of tzitzis helps uri'isem oisoi. It's a mitzvah you look at. And when you look at it, what does it improve? Your vision. Not just physical vision, but you see things differently. There's so many people today that have volunteered to be lobotomized. Everybody knows what a lobotomy was? Nebuch, in America, all around the world, there were insane asylums. In America, it was unbelievable. Insane people were put into these asylums. They were not properly cared for. And when they made too much trouble, so in the asylum they would do a surgery on their brain. They would take out, I think, a piece of the frontal lobe, and they made them vegetables. So they just laid in bed the whole day and they spoon-fed them. This way these people couldn't make any trouble. They were lobotomized. And there were insane asylums where you had to do nothing. You just walked around and force-fed the people never, because they couldn't get out of bed. They were basically brain dead. Brain dead in the sense that they were breathing, etc., but they had no thinking capacity. And today, there's a spiritual lobotomization. Don't think about anything because someone already has spoken on the issue, and therefore you need not think about it anymore. And that's how a good portion of Klal Yisrael lives. Please don't think about this. In fact, you don't have a right to think about it, because someone has spoken on the issue. So we have this tremendous Nisayan, and the Nisayan becomes covered up in all kinds of words that are meant to make you feel guilty. And of course, we understand that in Pirkei Avos, one of the 48 ways to be kind of Torah is Emunas Chachamim. We have to have Emunas Chachamim. Without Emunas Chachamim, we don't have Torah. We have to be minded that Moshe was Moshe Torah, Yeshua, etc. There's such a thing called Emunas Chachamim. But I don't believe Chacham more than I believe God. That's already Avodah Zarah. The human being is there only to serve God. And so Chedushim is telling us when the message of a Gadol is something that's just Parshat, there's something wrong there. It's not 1 and 1 is 2. This is not people say, but he knows better. What do you mean he knows better? The Parshat Pshat in the Torah, in the Gemara, the Chazal. This is not right. This is improper. No. It's a hirosha. Because times have changed, they understand things a lot better than we understand it. I'll give you an example. Sometimes you have to pull the blanket off the bed to see that there's a sheretz hiding underneath the blanket. Because if you don't pull the blanket off, you think a human being's under the blanket. But what's under the blanket is a horse. Yeah, you don't know what's under there. It looks like a big thing. You pull it off, it's a horse. You have to pull the blanket off sometimes to know what's really on the bed. For years and years and years, pre-Medina, post-Medina, and until today, you hear people talk about the Gemara in Ksubis on Kuf Yud Aleph, that you're not allowed to make a Medina because of Sholosh Shavuos. Gemara in Ksubis Kuf Yud Aleph. It says 3 times in Shir Hashirim, Hishbati eschem benois Yerushalayim. God said, I make you swear the daughters of Yerushalayim. What Shavuot did they make? So Gemara says these are the 3 Shavuos, or maybe more. Shalosh Shavuos. There are three Shavuos, 3 oaths that the Jewish people took. One of them is Shelo Yalu B'Choyma. You're not going to go back B'Yad Chazok to Eretz Yisrael. You're not going to create a revolt and try to retake Eretz Yisrael because I've put you into Golus. And you don't go back unless I tell you to go back. The second one is Shelo Yimredu Ba'umais. You should not revolt against the nations of the world in which you were sent into Golus. Those are the 2 that are Nogea for us. We're going to deal now with, obviously, everybody talks about this. This is the whole Satma Shita and the Turei Karta Shita. You're not allowed to create a Medina. Ad Kedei Kach, that the head of Neturei Karta this week, the Rebbeinu Shalom is constantly, unfortunately, building new rooms in Gehenna. There used to be only certain rooms in Gehenna, but he has to keep on, he's doing Shiputzim in Gehenna because he has to keep on building additions to put new rooms, to put new signs on the doors. There'll be a sign called Neturei Karta. I'm not embarrassed to say that. A sign called Neturei Karta in Gehenna. Remember, the Neturei Karta sent their representatives to Tehran, to the convocation there where they were talking about Holocaust denial. Neturei Karta shook hands with Kakamemi or Shmakamemi, whoever was in power then. They shook hands, they took pictures, and in front of the United Nations they go protesting with Palestinian flags. And if you go deep into Mei Shorim, there are houses that have the Palestinian flag outside, hanging from there. So I don't know what their problem is. Pack up and go to Ramallah with the flag. We'll see how long you last there. What do you want? Take and go move there. The rent's cheap. So these are the kind of people. And this week, the head of Turei Karta here sent a Mazel Tov to Mansour Abbas. Mazel Tov! You become part of the Israeli government. We're happy to see Arabs are in the government, of course, because we're hoping until the whole Israeli government are Arabs and you destroy the whole Medina, Baruch Hashem, this is the beginning of a very good thing. So when we wake up in the morning and we say, Gevalt, how can we have a government with Arabs in it? Do you understand there are Mishagoyim that wake up in the morning and say, Baruch Hashem, there are Arabs in the government. And they send a Mazel Tov to Mansour Abbas. Now, if I had to put my money, and I don't have much money, but if I had to put all my money on a bet and say, am I right or are they right? Am I willing to bet the farm that they ain't going to Gan Eden for what they're doing? I'm ready to bet the farm. The only possibility to be a Melitz Yosha there is they're insane. That's all. If they're not insane, they're Rishoyim. If they're not insane, they're Rishoyim. So, the Satmar Shita and the Torah Kata Shita, to a great extent, is built on the Sholosh Shavuos. One of their big things is Shelo Yimredu Ba'umos. The Gemara in Ksuba says that we're not allowed to revolt against the nations to which we're exiled to. We have to be good little boys. Ksuba's Kuf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Take a look at the Marsha. And therefore, the creation of the Medina is revolting against the nations that we were exiled to, however you put that. The whole Shita is based upon a foundation made out of marshmallows, because for those of us who learn Gemara, we know we learn Gemara, and the Gemara says, if you do this, you chayib, if you do this, you potter, if you do this, you tomei, if you do this, you tar. If you do this, you pay. If you do this, you don't have to pay. And then suddenly, in the middle of a sugya, it says, and Avraham Avinu said to Sarah, X, Y, Z. We understand that we've gone from a halachic discussion to an agadic discussion. We understand, and they're not the same. So the idea that the Gemara in Ksuba says that God made the Jewish people take 3 oaths. We understand we're in a agadic situation here. Who made the oath? Was there, in order to have an oath, you have to have a Sefer Torah with you? What are we talking about? We're talking about an agadic statement, right? And for this reason, the Rambam doesn't quote it, and the Ramban doesn't quote it. It's Nagadat, okay? It's Nagadat. It's like somebody would open a Medrash Rabbah and say, oh, look at this Medrash Rabbah, this is the halacha. Okay. So the whole thing's built on marshmallows. But it's a Davar Noriva Oyim. Corona did a lot of good things, did a lot of unbelievable things. People died are terrible, but Corona pulled off the cover, and we see the sheretz that's on the bed. One of the shrotzim that we realized was on the bed is this whole Satma, quote unquote, in the Torah Kata Shita. Shlayim Redubaimis. You can't revolt against the nations when you're exiled. So I print out a picture in my house. I have a whole notebook of Corona. It's already 2 notebooks of pictures that I printed out from the news. One is a picture of Satmar Hasidim in Williamsburg. The New York State put chains and locks on all public parks because they didn't want children to go into the parks during the height of Corona. We locked down the parks here also. You weren't allowed to go to the parks. But in New York, they have chain link fences around the parks, yeah, where they still haven't cut them open and stolen the metal. They're chain link fences, and they're sealed with chains and locks. And there's pictures of Satmar Chassidim, so far like big guys. They have these big cutters, and they're cutting the chains off, and they're going to play in the parks with their kids. Now look at the picture, I say, what happened to Shlo Yimedu Bumas? What happened? The government that you've been exiled to locked the place down. What do you mean you're cutting down chain link fences? You can't do that. Now that we can do. But to go to Eretz Yisrael, that's a Merida Bumas. You understand? So, we understand that Eretz Yisrael is a tough subject. I'll end with this, and this is a Davar Parshat to me. The Gemara in Sukkah says, Kol HaGodol Mechaveira Yitzroi Godol Hemenu. The bigger a person is, the greater a Godol he is, the more Torah he knows, the bigger his Yetzer Hara is. So the Gemara says, Kol HaGodol Mechaveira Yitzroi Godol Hemenu. What does the Gemara mean? That great Gedolim have a tremendous Taivas Noshim. Great Gedolim have a great taiva for pornography. Great Gedolim wake up with a great taiva to eat chaza. What is Kol HaGol Mechvei Yitzar Godol Hemenu? To me, it's over Parshat. Kol HaGol Mechaver Yitzar Godol Hemenu is the Yetzer Hara of Eretz Yisrael. Because Eretz Yisrael means all 613 mitzvahs. The Yetzer Hara, we talked about this so many times, the Yetzer Hara, the Ramban says, Kiyum HaMitzvah in Eretz Yisrael is the real place to do mitzvahs. The address to do the 613 mitzvahs Eretz Yisrael. Now, we understand Shemitah, Trumas HaMaisvos, that's Eretz Yisrael. You can't do Trumas HaMaisvos in Williamsburg. We understand that. But Tefillin, you do in Williamsburg in Monsey like you do in Eretz Yisrael. That's a lie. You don't do it. That tefillin and mezuzah in Chutz La'aretz is the tefillin and mezuzah that the Ramban calls Hatzivi Lach Tziyonim. It's just to keep your memory going, so that when Mashiach comes, you'll know what tzitzis and tefillin are. Because if for 2,000 years you didn't wear tzitzis and tefillin, Mashiach will come and have to educate hundreds of thousands of Jews. This way they know what tefillin and mezuzah is. They'll come to Israel and we're ready to go, set to go. So the only reason you wear tefillin and etc. in Chutz La'aretz and do these mitzvahs is only because you shouldn't forget when Mashiach comes how to do these mitzvahs. Ad kedei kach, I'll tell you, Bekitza, a Rav told me, a Talmud of Rav Nebenzahl, he told me Rav Nebenzahl does it, and he paskins for his Talmid, Rav Nebenzahl the Rav in Yerushalayim. He said when he flew, he's not well, I may have asked him Shanish be well, when he flew to England, for example, and he came back to Eretz Yisrael, so if he left, let's say, 8 o'clock in the morning, England, he already davened with his tefillin, he landed in Eretz Yisrael, it was still daytime, he put his tefillin back on again, because of this Ramban. Because it's not the same mitzvah tefillin. The tefillin in London was Hatzivi Lach Tziyonim. It was a mitzvah of tefillin just not to forget about it. The mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael is the place to do the mitzvahs. So, if a person if the Yetzer Hara wants to drop a nuclear bomb, on all the Yiddishkeit, where is the nuclear bomb going to drop? I don't want you to wear tzitzis. All right, so I dropped off one of the 613. I don't want you to keep Shabbos. Terrible. I dropped another one of the 613. But what happens if the Yetzer Hara wants to drop a nuclear bomb? I want to find a place to drop the bomb where I destroy all 613. Where should I drop the bomb? Stay in Muncie. Because if you stay in Muncie, your Shabbos is not the highest level Shabbos, your tefillin is not the highest level tefillin, your tzitzis is not the highest level tzitzis, your mezuzah is not the highest level mezuzah, your achilas matzah is not the highest. One thing, I attacked 613. Mamish, one bomb, I attacked 613. So why play around with this one? I'll destroy the whole binyan here. Do your tzitzis, do your tefillin, gzai gishmak, learn your Torah. Just please don't take it to Eretz Yisrael. You take it to Eretz Yisrael, it's a whole different mitzvah. Anybody that's greater than the next person has a greater Yetzer Hara. What's that greater Yetzer Hara? Until the guy in the white donkey comes, we stay in Chutz La'aretz. All of us are going to stay here. Or as the rabbi in Cleveland said, we're going to stay locked up in our houses, in our koilim, and we're going to learn Torah until the knock comes on the door. Baruch Hashem, the Yetzer Hara says, you know what? This guy's doing my work for me. Instead of having to go over to each Jew and say, don't go to Eretz Yisrael, I now got a rough from the pulpit saying it. It's great. Maybe we can partner up and sign a partnership agreement with these rabbis. So it's important that not only we understand the Meraglim at the beginning of the Parsha, we understand tzitzis at the end of the Parsha. When we look at our tzitzis, start thinking about putting on tchelis, a good thing. Pasuk says tchelis, and today you can get real tchelis. Oh, I wouldn't do that. We haven't done it for 1,000 years. Okay, we didn't do it for 1,000 years. Learn the Parsha of tzitzis with Rashi. Take 10 minutes a day, learn Shulchan Aruch Hilchos Tzitzis, and there's a Mishnah Brura volume now that's just on tzitzis that has unbelievable pictures in it. The Sforim Stores has Hilchos Tzitzis with unbelievable pictures. Tzitzis is Masak in the Chet HaMeraglim. It's Masak in the Golus. The reason why we're in Golus, what's the whole reason for all the disasters of Tisha B'Av? The Chet HaMeraglim. When did the Meraglim come back and talk Lashon Hara in Eretz Yisrael? On Tisha B'Av. The Rebbeinu Shalom said, you spoke Lashon Hara on Eretz Yisrael on Tisha B'Av, you're going to cry every year on Tisha B'Av. We want to be Masak in the Chet HaMeraglim, we want to be Masak in Tisha B'Av. Rebbeinu Shalom gave us medicine at the end of those week's Parsha of Tzitzis. We should be Zoich, Milkayim, the mitzvah of Tzitzis, Gilchosa, and to understand who we listen to, who we don't listen to, and Machshiv Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Besuas Toivus to Klal Yisrael. Should see Bias Mashiach, Tzidkein of Meher V'Yameinu Amen.